Good afternoon. Welcome to today's Charity Village webinar. We will just wait a moment for everyone to join the session. Okay, we will get started. Welcome to today's Charity Village webinar. My name is Mercedes Marup, and I am the Marketing and Communications Specialist with Charity Village. As we are gathering here on a virtual platform, it is important to acknowledge that each of us is joining this webinar from the ancestral or unceded lands of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people. As a settler on this land, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Anishinaabe, which includes the Ojibwe of Fort William First Nation. For those who may be joining a Charity Village webinar for the first time, Charity Village is Canada's largest online job board for the nonprofit sector. In addition to our online job board, organizations can also post volunteer positions. So if you're looking for work or to recruit talent in the sector, Charity Village is the place to start. We also have a ton of excellent resources for nonprofit professionals, including online courses, articles, fundraising tools, and free webinars like the one we are presenting today. Before we start today's webinar, I would like to quickly run through some housekeeping items. You may have noticed when you joined the webinar today that you were automatically put on mute. Since we have hundreds of participants in today's session, it is important for us to minimize the amount of background noise so everyone can clearly hear the presentation. But you can still ask questions and make comments using the question box at the bottom of the Zoom control panel. Look for that at the bottom of your screen. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar, so please submit your questions as you think of them, and we will do our best to get to as many as possible. You can also email your questions to webinars@charityvillage.com. If you happen to encounter any technical issues with the webinar, whether with viewing the presentation or with the audio, please let us know in the question box or by sending us an email. We will do our best to get any technical difficulties resolved as quickly as possible, but in a worst case scenario, please remember that we are recording today's webinar and we will send you the full recording by email tomorrow. So if you get called away or disconnected, you will still be able to view the full presentation. And with that, I'd like to welcome our presenter, Rencia Mellis, founder of Integral Workplace Health.
Thank you, Mercedes. Thank you for that introduction and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. Before I get into the slides, I always speak to people a little bit about how I present. And I do let people know that I don't go bullet point by bullet point by bullet point, but everything that I talk about will be touched on somewhere on the slides. And as mentioned by Mercedes, the recording will be available and the slides will also be available to you over time. So let's just talk about this. My name is Rencia Mellis. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I'm older than the picture there. In the meantime, I'm older. But I am the founder of Integral Workplace Health, and I've spent over 25 years working in mental health in the workplace. I'm a certified psychological health and safety advisor, and I have recently joined ICAS World, a global EAP provider, as their clinical operations manager for Canada. And so I'm going to leave it at that and keep moving here. And I am based in the city of Pickering in Ontario, and I would like to read the land acknowledgement, honoring the first keepers of the land in this area. The city of Pickering resides on land within the jurisdiction of the Williams Treaties and on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of Squaxin Island, First Nations, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. This acknowledgement reminds us of our responsibilities and our relationship and the ancestral lands on which we learn, share, and live. And as I speak this, I always ask people to take a moment to also think about what we're actually talking about, and that this is more than words, that we need to carry this forward in our thoughts and actions, besides just mentioning it as a piece of verbiage. So let's get moving going forward. So one of my objectives for today, my objectives are really quite limited or quite small. I am hoping really that I can bring you some ideas, give you some new perspectives, and that you'll be able to embrace those ideas and perhaps shift and challenge some of your existing assumptions and ideas. And I hope to plant the seed by talking about different things that you could potentially do to change things in the workplace, to increase mental health in the workplace, to plant the seed of some ideas that you can take forward and then implement in your own unique situation. Now, we can't really talk about mental health in the workplace without actually looking at where we've come from over the last 3 years. We must also be looking back. And, I've been talking about mental health in the workplace over the last 3 years in relationship to COVID. And we are now in a different phase. When we started out 3 years ago, really, we were in a place where there was shock, there was surprise, there was resistance and denial. People then went into like a phase of optimism, thinking we can handle this, we're going to deal with this. And as it dragged on, people became exhausted because they needed to learn new things. They needed to do things differently. They ran into ongoing anxieties. The uncertainty didn't let up. And so now where we are now with the changing directives, with some of the social decisions and social restrictions changing, we're now in the new piece of developing the new normal. And what that means basically is that we have created within that phase, all those things that we went through, people have adjusted. In that phase of exhaustion and disillusionment, people come out of that by creating new normals, by creating new ways of doing things, by adopting to what needs to be done, by incorporating new skills, by learning new things. And so we're in that place now where people, again, are thinking about the future and looking at making decisions, but they're not the way that they used to be. And that's one of the things that I need to really emphasize here. So we have been changed by this process that we've gone through. And even though the most acute pieces of mental health impact of COVID-19, the anxiety, the resentment, the anger, the mourning and grief, all of those things have kind of abated and died down. But there is still an aftermath of people that are dealing with the ongoing loss and the anniversary of people that they lost, or perhaps their own anniversary of becoming ill and needing to recover. Some people are still dealing with the impact on their day-to-day life of long COVID. So it's not gone. There is still an aftermath that remains in terms of impact on mental health. What also happened during that period was that there was an escalation of existing vulnerabilities. So people that were already in difficult situations, people that were already stressed or anxious, that was escalated by needing to adapt, by all of the impact, by the social messages around the risks that we were exposed to, by the changes that they needed to make, by the cutoff from the resources that they were experiencing because their normal coping strategies were undermined, their social connections were changed. There was definitely an escalation, and that also still reverberates going forward. At the same time, what came out of this was that there is a new awareness and openness. If anything, we are now much more open about mental health. We're much more aware that it's important, that we need to pay attention to it, that it affects how we are in the workplace. So that is one of the good things that came out of, this confrontation and this difficult period that we went through as a society. And what also came out of that is tremendous resilience. And I'm going to talk a bit about that as we go further down through the slides. Ultimately, and this is research from George Bonanno, who is really one of the leading researchers in resilience, most people have come out of the pandemic more resilient. There have been reports of increased well-being because for some people, the existing stressors that they were dealing with were actually alleviated and they were in a better place. They found better balance, different balance, new skills. So those are some of the good things that came out of this difficult period for our society and for the people in the society. And of course, on the other end, we've come out with a changed world around us. When we went into COVID was a very different circumstance socially. Now we're dealing with more awareness around the climate, around the war in Ukraine. There's a lot of things, the inflation, the economy. Those are new social stressors that people didn't have before we entered into COVID. So let's talk a bit about resilience and what that looks like. And I talk about this because we need to look back to look at what is the road that we've traveled. What are we dealing with now? What is the fallout? What are the gains that we've made out of the last 3 years and out of this difficult period? The other thing is we need to be looking forward. And when we talk about resilience, a lot of the time, people only focus on the bounce back aspect. It's often defined as the ability to bounce back, but it is much more than that. Resilience also has to do with the ability to be able to withstand stress and adverse events and extreme events. It also has to do with day-to-day practice of things like pivoting and adapting. And that is something that's true for individuals as much as it is true for organizations. So when we're talking about resilience and we're talking about the future and looking at how can we build resilience for the future, we need to understand that this is not something that is just about bouncing back at the other end. This is about things that we do ongoing. And I love this piece of information from Gary Hamel when he talks about strategic resilience. It is talking about the ability to continually be pivoting and adapting, to be able to move around resources, to be sensitive to what is coming down the line and to make conscious decisions and to respond to that. And that's what people with resilience do as well. They are flexible, they have openness and curiosity, and they are able to do good problem solving based on that. So that is part of it. And of course, the starting point when we go into adverse events makes all the difference as well. The starting point in our resilience, the levels of stress and distress that we're already experiencing, and perhaps the circumstances that we are living at any given point in time. So when we talk about resilience, when we talk about going through difficult events, before is not the same as after. So people create a new normal. And when I talked about that, or kind of that slide with the phases that people went through, people started to adjust. Once they get through the disillusionment, the anger, the exhaustion, people create a new way. And that is just a testament to how incredibly resilient people are. People adapt, they make new ways, they still find ways to be happy, to create well-being, to connect with people, to do what needs to be done to create balance in their lives. But as they're going through, they come out on the other end differently than what they entered into that event. And certainly for COVID, a lot of our beliefs and values were challenged. We were challenged on our beliefs around the world around us, what that looks like, what society looks like. We were challenged on the people around us. Maybe our relationships changed, how we see ourselves and how we cope has changed, and what we need in life has changed. Definitely, beliefs and values also for employers have changed in terms of how they relate to their employees, how things need to be done differently, and how they need to manage things in the workplace, how they needed to manage their employees in the workplace. People come out with new confidence because they find a new balance, they find a new way. So they are renewed. They've come through a very difficult period. And once the dust is settled, they can they can kind of like clean themselves off, look around and say, hey, look, I came through that. Look at all the new things that I can do. And whether that is learning how to play the piano, because COVID gave them the time to learn how to to use the piano, or how to do the piano on Zoom and have a concert with other people, or how to run a meeting on Zoom. People learned new skills that are going to count to their new confidence and new way in terms of how they engage with the world around them. Relationships have changed. Relationships within the workplace, with the workplace have changed. Relationships with the people around them, because the social fabric was changed. People were disappointed in some people. All of those, polarizing debates around vaccinations, around masks, all of those things have affected relationships. And we saw that family relationships, friend relationships have been changed, and people needed to find a new way to figure out, what does that mean? There is new people, there's people that they lost. And of course, as I mentioned, the world around us has changed, and the circumstances, and it has changed in a way that now we go to the store and we make a decision. We make a conscious decision about, are we going to wear a mask or not? Are we going to be surprised when other people wear masks? We've learned to respect for people, whether when they're wearing masks, when they want to keep a distance. So all of those things have changed in the world around us, just even on a day-to-day basis, on how we engage with things. If we get in a car with somebody, if we go to a concert, we're still doing those things, but we're not the same as we were before. And in that new normal that was developed, in that new normal where people found benefits. And I saw this happen. It was really fascinating. I was doing webinars on stress management, living with uncertainty, coping with COVID, for the entire period that we were going through that pandemic, or for the most acute period of the pandemic. And so what I saw people really shifting over time as we were talking about it, from the initial stress, from the initial, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to put my kids. I don't know how to organize my time. How do I put in boundaries? All of those things. And this is, again, a testament to the tremendous resilience of people under distress, is that they found ways to make it work. And so people started to enjoy the commute, which always was very stressful for people, but also a time of, winding down from the workplace, or shifting and putting in boundaries between home and work. People found advantages. Okay, so I'm not commuting. It's saving me time. Look at what I can do with my time, what I can do with my money. I can spend more time with my family. Maybe I can put more time into working. People found back their families. So all of these things were things. This is research, by the way, by Microsoft and by Abacus, that found all of these things. As they asked people, what was the benefits of this, and what did they do with not having to commute? What were the benefits that they found in working from home? And as much as people needed to learn how to put in boundaries, how to manage, their sense of guilt about, wanting to be on all the time, or worrying that people were thinking that maybe they were sloughing off. There was a lot of advantages that people found from working at the kitchen table, being able to see their kids, that they were, and some of it was about, work relationships, that they were more distant from that. So particularly minority groups and special interest groups, it was a boon for them, because they were away from, for instance, microaggressions that they would have to put up with in the workplace. They were away from the emotional labor of always needing to be nice and smiling to people. They could let their guard down in between being on Zoom or being on a meeting. They were always needing to show how productive and engaged and hardworking they were. They were able to just focus on doing the job, rather than doing the whole gesturing thing that showed that they were doing the job. People were able to take breaks. And I love this piece. And this is a really key piece, I think, for managers to understand. One of the things that they found was that people spread their hours out. They actually made longer days. They worked the same amount of time, but they took more breaks. So they put in more personal time, and that actually led to increased productivity, because they were able to step away to pet the dog. They were able to step away to have a chat with their kid, to go and grab a coffee, maybe stare out the window and think about what they were doing for a moment, so that they would be more creative. So they were away from that always on culture. People really liked that. They didn't mind working longer days in exchange for having the ability to incorporate personal time into that. They had improved work-life balance. So these are some of the things that they did. And people really reported that the work from home, many people reported that it improved their mental health. And that, I think, was the outcome of a lot of that, being able to be away from the constant interactions, the constant pressure, and being able to spend more quality time with the people that ultimately are going to make up your mental health, the people that you love and care for in your home. So now people had all those benefits. They're in the new normal. And now they're being asked to change again. Now, we know people don't like to change. People don't like to be told. And so what we're finding now, so some of these things where people are defending what they gained from the new normal, is this is where we're getting all this talk about quiet quitting, about great resignation, about rage quitting, where people are just not tolerating certain things. One of the relationships that has clearly changed is the relationship between employer and employee. And this is something that has happened both in the for-profit and the nonprofit sector, where people have sat down and thought about, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? Who am I doing this for? And what price am I prepared to pay? And so they really changed how they perceive those things. And they also perceive that they have an increased power in relationship to people that they felt that they were beholden to, and have become actually much more internally driven in terms of their accountability to get things done and their productivity, and taking the credit for what they've done. So these are some of the things that people went through. And so asking people to change back, this whole discussion about hybrid or working from home, all of those things are really not the issue. When I put here, don't confuse the symptoms with the causes, and the positions with the interests. What people gained working from home, those are the interests. And that's not equivalent to working from home or working hybrid. What it is, that these are the things that ultimately determine quality for people, the interest that people have, being able to spend personal time, being able to take a break in between, being able to work autonomously. These are the kind of things that people are now defending and that they want to keep. And on top of that, of course, they just went through 3 years of change and adaptation. And so now that period, they found their balance, they're being asked to change again. So you can imagine that in terms of stress and distress, people would just like to rest in place for a while before they go back into stressful environments. And so being told, being asked to change again, and realizing that they've reconsidered who they are, where they're working, who they're working for, why they're working, what they're doing, what their own motivators are, people are not happy. And so these are some stats. I'm not going to read all of these bullets out to you. People are not happy with their employers. They're not happy at work. They're not engaged. Now, when I said these are old problems, because now it's really become a problem, because we've got, labor shortages, because we do have people that have, visited another country, another way of being around the work and the workplace. People have taken a different perspective to it, but this is not a new problem. The fact that people have not been engaged is something that we've known for a very long time. And, so this is why I'm telling you this. These numbers here, they could be applied. I could say these are all from 2022 and 2023, but the reality is that this has been going on for a long, long time. But the shakeup that COVID has given us has made that we're much more aware of it. And there's much more imperative to actually respond to this low engagement in a new and creative way, in a different way than we've done before. So what is it that people are looking for? The average adult spends about 90,000 hours at work, in the workplace. And so the workplace is a huge part of their well-being. And these are the things that people look for. People are looking for culture, balance, meaning. Research shows that, people, and I believe this is Microsoft, that people said that they would choose a positive culture over more work, more money. In the early 2000s, there was already research from the Fraser Institute that found that people would forego a raise in order to work in a positive relationship work environment. These are the things that come up. I've been going through, and I've been doing this for years. I've been looking at the Deloitte, the Gallup, the PricewaterhouseCoopers, all of these global employee surveys, and of course, Microsoft does them now. There's just mountains and mountains of this. These are the things that keep coming back. Why do people stay? Because they want meaning. Why do people stay? Because they want a positive community that they want to work with. Why do people stay? Because they want to be seen. And this is not news for anybody, or shouldn't be news for anybody, because the I see you, this is really what they're saying is, I want to be seen. I want to be seen as a human being. In 2016, Deloitte was already talking about shifting from employee experience to human experience as the core tenet for engaging and motivating people to be productive and with the workplace. So this has been going on for a very long time, but because the relationships were in a different place, and there were a lot of fears, and we had a lot of beliefs and challenges, and we're going to talk a little bit about it, there was not the kind of response that we would have had from all the calls from people to actually start implementing these different things. And I do want to emphasize this, the ICU culture, that is really the core here. People want to be seen as human beings, as whole human beings. They're not employees, they're actually human beings. And so this is something that they found already in 1924, and this is the famous Hawthorne experiments, where they changed the lighting and they did a number of different experiments. And every time they changed things, that showed, hey, we're watching you, we see what you're working, we're trying to do something to support you, to change the work environment. People actually improved their productivity. And it wasn't necessarily the lighting. What made the difference was the fact that they saw that management was concerned about their well-being. So all of that goes to mental health. If you look at this definition, and I always come back to this, what are people looking for? When we look at all of these buzzwords, these terms that come up out of global employee surveys, these words all come back in looking for mental health. What is mental health? Mental health is a sense of well-being, having positive experiences, positive emotions about being at work, about anywhere that they are. Again, don't forget, people spend about a third of their adult life in the workplace. So that is a huge source of stress, and it's a huge source of well-being for people. And it depends on how you manage things, which it's going to be. So this is what they're looking for. They're looking for a sense of well-being. They're looking at growth and potential, trust, autonomy, the opportunity to live up and to do things that are recognized, that make a difference. They are looking to be productive and fruitful, to do things that have an impact, to feel that what they're doing actually is relevant. And this is something that definitely millennials, even more than others, when they talk about values and living values, they look for their organizations to have particular value systems that match their own, and to have internal values that match what they espouse externally. Is part of that fruitful and productive feeling that it is a match with their values. And they need to connect with community, not just outside of the workplace with their family or with their volunteer group or with their church community, but the community in the workplace. And that doesn't mean, by the way, that community doesn't have to be, all in person, but they need to have a sense of connection and being part of something that is bigger than themselves. And I put there, the Mental Health Commission of Canada national standard, because to me, everything we're talking about, and I sometimes feel like a broken record about this, everything that we talk about, it comes back to that piece for the workplace of looking at how am I fostering mental health, all of those things that people are asking for. So this has the national standard, which is a wonderful piece of aggregated research on what needs to be done and what are the things that create a workplace that fosters mental health, psychological health and safety in the workplace. That is in that standard. And that's why I put that there, because I do come back to that, because it is so comprehensive and it is a great guide for moving forward for organizations to create that mental health and to foster that. But what can we do when we're confronted with a new normal, when we're confronted with that last phase of coming out of a difficult period? One of the things we can do is we can pretend like nothing happened. So now that we're out of the woods and we feel that we're being safe, we can pretend like nothing happened. And the reality is, before and after are not the same. So if you're going to try as an organization to pretend it didn't happen, or we're just going to pick up where we left off, and before we sent people home to do their work from home, you're going to be trying to put a square peg into a round hole. That's not going to work. And there's a lot of research that shows that there's, this is some of the stuff that's firing the Great Resignation, where people will not put up with that anymore. The relationship where you just say, this is the way we're going to do it, and you're going to do it the way I told you to, is not working anymore. So there's different ways that you need to engage. And this is, again, not a new message. This is something that's been going on for a long time. The talk about servant leadership, about bottom up management, and learning how to manage the system and the organism in a way that people feel that they are part of it and that they have input in order to engage them, that the authoritarian, I'm going to tell you because I pay your check, isn't working anymore. So that's one of the things that people can do. They can try, and people do the same thing, the same as organizations, act like nothing happened. The other thing is that one of the things that we need to recognize is really there is no existing best practice. When we're going back to, acting like nothing happened, we're coming out on the other end, and we are kind of in a void and a kind of uncertainty because pandemic isn't completely done. There are still uncertainties, but we're kind of back into quiet waters. And so one of the things that we try to do is we go back to old best practice. It worked for us before, and we're going to try and do that again. And the reality is, at this point in time, we know that there are things that we don't know. We don't know how everything is going to play out, if only because we have now economic challenges. We've got inflation, we've got, recession talk, we've got the war in Ukraine, all of these things that people don't actually know what the world is going to look like. So planning forward is really, really hard. So what the best we can do is create good practice. Recognize this is a complicated situation. We're going to create good practice for the moment that we're in right now. And this is, again, right back to Gary Hamel about the continuing being able to pivot and adapt as things change. Recognizing that there are things that you don't know, that you need to research, that you need to figure out about how to move forward. And when we're talking about emergent practice, we're also about recognizing that there are things that you don't know that you don't even know. There's always unexpected things. When work from home came in and everybody introduced that, there were a lot of things that we never anticipated that worked out quite differently than we expected, if only because we didn't expect that with the work from home, that would so change the balance between employers and employees and the dialogue between them. We didn't know that ahead of time. We did what we needed to do. We did as best we could. We did our good practice under the circumstances, out of necessity. And that attitude is something that we need to hold on to, because that's part of the resilience for going forward into the future and being prepared for changes as they go along. So I hope that makes sense to people when I'm talking about that, about looking at doing the best that we can under circumstances and taking that long view going forward. Now, when we talk about things that have changed for organizations, and these are some of the things that, in order for you to come up with new solutions to new ways and understanding and being in touch, when you want to pivot and want to respond and realize that before and after are not the same, here are some of the things that you need to be taking into account as an organization. Is one, always on is out. The always on thing, even in 2014, Deloitte was already talking about the overwhelmed employee and needing to change that. That whole belief system about needing to always be on and needing to always be showing that to live to work, that belief system is no longer working, because people empirically realize that it's not good for them, it's not healthy, and it's not productive. So people have pulled back from that. That was a new thing that developed over the last, 15 years, where they're the always on, people needed to be hustling and they needed to be always be focused on work. That's out. That's not happening anymore. You can't base it on that anymore. We also found out there's tons and tons of research. And again, empirically, people experience this because they were in control of their time, that downtime and breaks are actually good for productivity. There is lots of research on this, and one of the things, with the surgence and the outcome of, for instance, mindfulness practice during the pandemic, lots and lots of people started to do stress management through mindfulness, through taking breaks, through stepping back, to reset, to realize that they needed to manage the stress that they were coping with. And the outcome of that was that they were more productive, they were more focused, and more creative in their work. So downtime and breaks, people have lived it empirically, and research supports that if you get up and take a walk, if you go and say hi to your kid, you're actually better at your work the next time. We also know, and we've always known, that micromanaging doesn't work. When you look at, like, Microsoft found that 87% of employees said that they were confident that they were as productive or more productive working from home throughout the pandemic than before. Whereas managers were very worried, and I understand why, because you're not seeing people in the office. All those markers that we used to look at, like, are they there? Are they focused on the screen? Are they chatting? Are they getting a coffee in the guest room, in the lunchroom? All of those markers on productivity and engagement, or not maybe not engagement, but being there, were gone from managers. So only 12% of managers felt confident about productivity because they lost so much of their markers and ways of measuring the engagement with people and seeing what people were doing. But we have always known that micromanaging doesn't work. People don't like to be told, and they don't need to be told all the time. They like being autonomous. They like problem solving. They like to be involved and to feel that they're contributing and making a difference. We also found out that teams can be asynchronous. We've always known that because of time zone differences, but we certainly found out that, if somebody steps away for half an hour to get a coffee or to bring their kid to school or look at their kids' homework, that didn't destroy the productivity. It didn't destroy the team. This team was still able to work forward. So asynchronous work was proven again that it worked. So we need to think about these things going forward. Luigi, you have your hand up. Is there something, is something off that we need to be aware of with the, okay, so I'm going to keep going then. So we found we've always known multitasking is not productive. So one of the things that came with the work from home is that people were able to manage their own time. They were able to put in some boundaries, and they would focus on one thing and get it done. And we know that multitasking is not productive. Multitasking, it takes longer to get something done because people are stepping in and out of things. And the ultimate outcome is less productive or lesser quality. And there's lots of research from that backs that up, from Desktop, from Pomodoro. And there's another one that just escapes me right now around the multitasking not being productive. But you can look it up, or I can send you links for that. Here's the thing, more hours doesn't equal more outcome. One of the things that we found is that, the always on culture meant that people were often feeling that they couldn't leave at 5 o'clock, that they needed to stay longer. That didn't mean that they were being more productive if they were in the office till 7 o'clock at night. And the same thing, again, empirically, people live this. When I said, people put in more personal breaks, so their days were actually longer. They were spread out over more time, but they still ultimately worked the same amount of hours, but they were more productive in those hours that they were focused on. But more hours just focused on work is not necessarily more productive. And, this is something that I can't stop coming back to, that the workplace can be the problem and the solution in terms of supporting mental health. And we certainly found that. And some, companies, to their detriment, realize that through the pandemic, when they found that they didn't make the right steps, and that they tried to manage things in a way that cost them dearly, and that has come to haunt them either now as we're coming out of the pandemic because people are leaving, and they've had it, or because there was a lot of dissent and losses during the pandemic. And certainly under that sense of urgency, that point was really driven home, what an impact how you manage the organization has. Now, these are all the new perspectives. So this is easy said. It means that we need to kind of change our minds. And one of the things that I realized is when we're looking at some of these things, they're very deeply rooted in a very North American Judeo-Christian kind of belief, even looking at what Freud, and I know that I'm getting psychoanalytic here, but we have somewhere deep down a belief that if you leave people to their own devices, they're going to sit around, eat, drink, have sex, and fight. That's kind of one of our basic premise in our culture, and certainly in the Anglo-Judeo-Christian culture, that people can't be left to their own devices because they're not going to be responsible. They're just going to lay back in their pajamas all day and eat chips. And so that's one of the things that has been proven wrong, but it's a very deeply ingrained, and it's one of the things that I truly believe has held us back from giving more freedom and giving people more autonomy and pulling back from some of our traditional management styles. Now, we are in a time of flux. So if there is ever a time, this pivot time where we're not in the crisis, but we're not out of the crisis either, is an amazing time for us to look at how can we do things differently. Can we challenge our existing beliefs and assumptions? Can we think about how ready are we for change? And also, what is the real return on investment on what do we want? And even when I work with people individually, the whole point is always, what is it that you want? Employees figured out what they want. They want mental health. They want those things that contribute to mental health, and they want the workplace to organize around those things and give them the autonomy and the freedom and the support that they need to have that mental health, spending time with their family, making sure that their work is meaningful, getting recognition, getting trust and support from the organization. Employees figured it out. Employers are still working it out at big and small level. And some people are making big changes. They're dreaming. You need to really be thinking about not just what are my quarterly numbers, what are the numbers and the outcomes I want? What kind of an organism, what kind of a community is this workplace? Because that's what your employees are looking for. They're not looking and taking joy because of your quarterly numbers. Maybe, yeah, because they might get a good bonus. But ultimately, what they stay for is those other aspects. And you need to think about, what do I want my organization to be like as an organism, as a system? What do I want that to be like? And you can do that on a big and on a small scale. The big thing, obviously, is, what's coming from the CEOs. And we see some people thinking big, where they're going to 4-day weeks or unlimited vacation time. These are the things that are coming from the top. But it's also the things that people need to think about as managers. What do I want my team to be about? What kind of message do I want to put it? How do I want to interact? And want my team to interact with each other in order to facilitate engagement and all those things that keep people tied to the workplace and productive. So of course, that's not going to be one size fits all. And this is why you really need to be talking to your employees. And again, this is that pivoting piece that, that's part of your resilience. You need to talk to your employees and dialogue with them to learn about what are their challenges. And it's going to be different for different groups. If you've got a lot of young people, one of the things that research has shown is that the people under 40, that they have less self-confidence and they have more anxiety about the workplace and about the future. These are people that have lived through 3 years of pandemic, change and uncertainty, and anything like they've lived through the 2008 crisis, they've lived through the pandemic. So all they've known is uncertainty and challenge. So they're a lot less confident than boomers might be. And also, of course, this is a developmental piece in terms of life experience. And their life experience has not been as optimistic as perhaps older people. We've also find that young people, a lot of young people entering the workplace, They want in-person interactions. They want more hand-holding because that's something that they need to learn. It's really hard to self-motivate and to learn all the new things about your job and your organization when you're sitting at home on your own behind a laptop. So a lot of young people have experienced loneliness and want more of that connection. The other thing that they found, for instance, is that women want more flexibility. And that's because, women, regardless of all the changes and improvements and whatever we've done in the role of women, women are still the main caregivers in the family. And so for them, what they found is that the commute time that they had that was freed up, they spent a lot of that actually in caring time, taking care of other people. And so for women, flexibility is something that is highly valued. And so when you look at that, you want to think about that. You need to look at what are the demographics and what am I hearing from my people? One of the things that I cannot emphasize enough is all of that sits with your managers. 70% of variance in the levels of engagement is related to the experience that people have with their manager. Managers are often promoted because they've got really good professional skills. That doesn't make them good managers. I have done so many manager consults with managers. They're just terrified. They don't want to have a conversation that they have to have bad news conversations with people or listen to somebody's problems because they don't know what to do. They don't know how to do empathy. They don't know how to elicit these conversations. It's terrifying for them because they're not properly trained to have these conversations that are not just about what people are supposed to be doing, to talk about mental health, to talk about how are you, what's going on with you, how can I help you, can I make a difference for you? All of those conversations are very hard, and yet they are the core, the linchpin that keeps the teams together, that aligns the team so that they're all working towards the same goals, that they get the same messages, that motivates and inspires people because of their leadership, and that engages the teams, or perhaps not. So I can only mention this: train, mentor, coach. And if you are a manager listening in and there is no opportunity for training or mentoring or coaching available, find a peer group, create your own peer group where you have an opportunity to talk about the challenges of being a manager, engaging in those difficult conversations, what that's like, getting some support from other people and guidance from others, or find yourself a mentor to help you with that. And the other thing, of course, is looking beyond the individual. When people slip in their productivity, have the courage to recognize that it's not always because they're inept, they have a bad attitude, or they're having mental health problems. Sometimes it's just the system around them that's not working properly. So when you listen to people, listen to those things and look at, not just fixing the individual, but also looking at, can I fix the system that is not actually facilitating optimum performance for that person? And then day-to-day stuff. And so I've got a couple of slides on this, and I want to make sure that there's question time as well, because I can see there's a lot of stuff in the Q&A. Here are some of the things. One of the things, I'm just going to highlight some of these things because these are just the seeds to think about, humanity. What might that look like? Human-centered workplace. First of all, that means that you can acknowledge the importance and the existence of mental health and the impact that it might have. That means awareness and openness that people have to allow people to talk about those things, to ask about it as a manager. How are you doing? How's your stress levels? Is there anything I can do about that? Offer support, offer people access to things like formal EAP, where they can get mental health support from a professional. Offer peer support. One of the workplaces that I've done work with is they have internal mental health first aid providers. These are peers that part of their job description and part of their role is that they are informal advisors, mentors, and supports for people that might be experiencing distress, either related to the workplace or spillover from outside of the workplace, that people have somebody that they can talk to. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know how to prioritize. I don't know how to push back. I just got 3,000 new things on my desk, and I said yes to all of them. How can I manage that? What are the things that I can do? What resources are available to me? That's what peer support can do. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. Put catch up on the agenda. I love this one, just asking people, start your meetings, whether it's a one-on-one meeting or whether it's a team meeting. Did you watch a movie? Did you like the movie? Why did you like that movie? How are you doing? How are your kids doing? People want to be seen as more than their numbers and their job description. So that catch up is an incredibly important piece. And it doesn't have to be out of house. It can be something as simple as, how are your kids doing? I heard your grandmother wasn't well. How is she doing? Is she feeling better? And did you watch a movie? Did you like it? Those kind of things create the connection with human beings and seeing people as more than that, and create synchronicities as well. Again, your managers, I've mentioned already flexibility. So I'm just going to keep going. One of the things that is very powerful is also when team members are encouraged to help each other out and to do things like say please and thank you. Send a card, send an appreciation email to somebody who did something for them to say thank you for that. But also, hey, I see that you look a little frazzled. What's going on? Is there something I can do to help? These are the things that you can encourage in teams and that bind the team to work together and be more productive, also on the work-related things. Creating balance, one of the most important things that I really want to highlight here is, in terms of getting rid of that always on thing, get rid of the check-ins after hours. People should not feel like they have to be checking in all the time. It's a very North American thing. A lot of European countries have put in, the right to disconnect, and actually put in legislation that blocks employers from reaching out after hours to people with emails and texts and whatever else. The province of Ontario has put the right to disconnect into legislation. And you can do that as a workplace. You can make that an obligation. Don't let people reach out to you at 10 o'clock at night. Watch, when are they sending you that email? When are they checking in? Are they doing that because they're worried that you think they're sloughing off if they're not on at 10 o'clock? So those are some of the things. And the work from home policy, that's a really good one as well. Needs to be very clear and transparent so that it's not a subjective decision. You need to have very clear policy, and that really does need to come from the top in terms of when are people allowed and under what circumstances, and how are people allowed to work from home, so that if somebody asks for that, it's not because the manager likes them or dislikes them, or the manager is fearful about what would happen if they let that person out of the office and to work independently. So have some really clear policies around that. Communication, this is, speaks for itself, needs to be two-way. And the one that I want to highlight there is the off-the-cuff communication. If people are going to be, flexible, if people are going to be allowed asynchronous teams, so, they're not on, some people are going to be working at 10, but they're not working 10 p.m., but they're not working at 10 a.m. Create places and times on platforms where people know when they can reach out, where people are, what their availability is. And that can be as simple as, like the dots on Microsoft Teams, where you can see if people are yellow, green, or orange, or red, so people can see where they are, when they are, if they're available. But also create with each other within your team a way that if people need to spontaneously run something by, off the cuff, you need to be able to talk to your team about how can we make that possible? What would be a good way for us to make that, if you have a question and you just want to run it by someone, where you would have gone and stood over the cubicle and just talked to somebody over the top of the cubicle to say, hey, what do you think about this? What are ways that you can do that, where people might be available for that, for off-the-cuff consultations? And how can they indicate that, hey, you can drop by and ask me something? So those are some of the things that you can think about in creating. And some of these things are repetitive because they actually go to multiple goals and objectives in terms of implementing in the workplace, a healthy workplace. So I'm going to just round this off, and then hopefully there'll be some time for our questions. So the conclusion that I hope that you're drawing from today, from all of this information, I know it's a lot and I went through it very quickly, but I hope something sticks with you and that you do feel inspired, because if you're able to take some of these new perspectives and learnings to be able to pivot and challenge some of our previous assumptions about, how we need to relate to employees, either from the top or as a manager in a team, or how we relate to our managers as employees or to each other. If you're able to challenge some of those things, you can find new ways of re-engaging with people to actually take advantage of this point of flux, to try out some good practice, to try out new ways that work for the here and now and the needs of people at this point in time. You can change things as things evolve. But that is part of the resilience, but it's also part of engaging people. And, when we're thinking about this, it doesn't all have to come from the top. It can be as simple as a manager thinking about, how can I, create more personal connections with people? How can I let go of my productivity paranoia, and what are other ways for me to see whether the outcomes are coming in? What different kinds of measurements can I use for that? How can I connect with people? How can I have that dialogue with people? So it doesn't have to be top down. So a lot of information very fast. And again, I hope something sticks. So let's have some questions that we can respond to. And I'm happy to stay on as long as there are questions to respond. So,
Great, thank you very much. Oh,
Yeah.
Renzia, there you go. So first question, do you have any advice for people who might be finding that there is a creep back towards overwork and less balance in the workplace?
And so can you give me the first part of that?
Do you have any advice for people who might be finding there's a creep back towards overwork and less balance in the workplace?
Well, it depends on where you're coming from. Like, if you're seeing that as a manager, part of that is engaging in that conversation with people around how are they doing, how are they balancing, how are they prioritizing. So that's one of the things that, as a manager, you need to be keeping an eye on as well. And, definitely people are feeling the pressure again. And my thought is they know what they need to do. So a lot of it, again, is challenging your assumptions, making sure that you build things in under the new circumstances. These are things, even if there is a creep, it's going back to what did you do differently and what was working for you earlier. And that can be, putting in boundaries around how you start and finish your day. It can be around making sure that you set a timer to check in with yourself every hour and a half, get up, stretch, drink some water, go to the washroom, grab a coffee, check in with somebody. So these are all the things that people started doing. Do a mindfulness check, do some deep breathing before you go into a meeting. All of these things that people were already doing. So if it's creeping, it means that they're losing things that they had learned and that were working for them. So it's going back to that piece.
Great, thank you. And as we are closing in on the hour mark, I would just like to remind everyone that you will receive a copy of the webinar recording, including the Q&A portion. So if you do have to leave at the hour mark, you will receive the extended Q&A portion, which we will continue after the 2:00 hour. So on to the next question. We had a few questions surrounding this topic. Will you please further explain how to balance providing enough support versus autonomy for staff?
Okay, so autonomy is really around giving people the opportunity to work. So autonomy is fostered by giving people the resources that they need so that they know what to do, giving them clear instructions around what's expected from them, and then letting them do it. Support means that if they don't know what to do, it's safe for them to come and ask. The other thing is support is, so it's allowing people to come to you, making sure that they have the resources and the training to do what you're asking them to do so that they can work autonomously. And the other thing is the support piece is, you can give people autonomy and still say, how's that working for you? Are you finding that you're able to manage your time? Are you finding that you're able to prioritize the tasks that you're getting? Because those are skills that you can ask about. You can also ask, like, how is your stress levels? How are things? What's going well? Questions, when you ask, the yes or no questions, things that you can ask. And this is what's going well, and what's not going well? What do you like and what do you not like? Those are great ways to elicit from people opportunities for support, whether those are support around their technical, professional abilities to do what they need to do, or whether it's support around mental health and the impact either of the workplace or things at home that might be affecting their productivity.
Thank you. I think yes, it clarifies the question. Thank you. And how, as a team leader, can you, an individual, model that it's okay not to always be okay in a situation? So how do you really reinforce that for your staff?
I love that question. That comes down to leading by example. When you look at, the leadership traits of good leaders, effective leaders, transparency, humility, admitting when you made a mistake, admitting that you don't always know all the answers, combined with optimism, those are the ways that you demonstrate and make it safe for people to talk about their own mental health and about their own challenges. You really do need to lead by example. You need to lead by example in terms of how you manage your workload, how you manage relationships and how you treat people, but also, by giving people, because people are not going to say, I'm not doing well, if you're always going to pretend you're really well. I love that question. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. Transparency is definitely key, right? So,
and honesty,
and honesty, exactly, clarity as well, right? So that's always good. Do you have any suggestions for resources or books to help people create healthy workplace boundaries?
Okay. For people individually, you mean?
Yes, please. There were just a couple questions asking for resources.
Okay. So one of the things that for organizations or managers, there's they can go to there's a couple of sites that I put in one of the slides that are about psychological health and safety, because that really describes, like the different needs that people have. So that's a resource for looking and assessing what needs to be done and what where you could start. Those are some of the things that you can put in there. In terms of putting in boundaries, I need to think about that because like a lot of the self-help is they'll tell you what to do but not how to do it. I think a lot of it really has to come from encouragement from your environment as well. So often, like getting involved in peer groups, having other people that also monitor for you and remind you, those are all ways to put in boundaries and to be reminded. And people often know, when I used to do counseling, people often know what they need and what they want. They just need permission to do it, whether that is, getting up and taking a walk around the block, petting their dog. They know it works for them. And getting that permission is something that sometimes starts by getting it from your manager. I don't know if that is a direct answer in terms of resources. I need to think about what resources that are not like at a meta level kind of HR manager type things.
Yes, I think that's helpful. And we can always post those as well afterwards if you just, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. Yeah.
What are the top 3 questions you should ask your employees to understand the status of psychological health and safety on your team?
Okay, if you want to just engage in that conversation, it's what's going well, what's not going well, what would you like to do differently? Those are the 3 that elicit answers. If you ask people, how are you? They'll say, yes, I'm fine. So no leading questions. It really is what's going well, what's not going well, and what would you like to have done differently, or what would you have done differently, or what would you like to have different? Those are the 3 that will give you some guidance on what's going on with people and gives you an entry point for action.
Great, thank you. And there may be people who have developed social anxiety during the pandemic or were managing this previous to the pandemic. Is it expected that people socialize? It is expected that a lot of people socialize in the office. So for example, having coffee or lunch breaks together and attending team events. Do you have any suggestions for how someone might approach this in terms of communicating with their coworkers and setting boundaries if they're uncomfortable in these situations?
For somebody to do it to themselves to give the indication. Well, here's a couple of things. One, CMHA, no, not CMHA, CAMH, sorry. CAMH actually has a wonderful campaign where people don't have to say anything, but they can have buttons. This is something that's free and that you can reach out to Cam H about. And it's like buttons like "not myself today." And so these are ways that people can indicate and then hopefully be respected about how they're feeling, what they need in the workplace. So that's one of the ways that is a lovely campaign from them. And it can be, it really has to do with creating a safe place where people don't have to, disclose too much, but where they can say. And I think it's all about, having mutual respect and fostering a climate of mutual respect. So somebody who has that, they can just say, "I'm not comfortable. I'd like to keep a distance." Again, the same there, transparency and clarity, without having to go into huge explanations about whether you were diagnosed with social anxiety or not. Just say, I prefer not to do that, or I'm not comfortable with that yet. Give me some time. I like you, but I can't do that right now. It's really not that complicated in terms of what the message is. It's really about allowing yourself and having an environment that allows you to say those things.
Yes, thank you. And we have shared a link to the initiative that Renzia mentioned in the chat, so you'll be able to access that there. And then you mentioned the positive aspects for people working from home. Were there negative implications for workers as well?
There were people, initially, certainly people felt very pressured. They were very anxious. Part of it is that it's much harder to put boundaries in this. I was just reading some research the other day about the commute and the value of the commute, because the commute saved money, and it was stressful because people spent like an hour in each way in traffic or whatever. But one of the things that the commute also did is it was a very clear boundary between home and work. And it was a time for people to, listen to the radio and reset their brain for when they got home. And so that is one of the things that got lost. The ability of natural boundaries was lost. As I mentioned, young people, they really struggle with the loneliness. A lot of people did struggle with loneliness, and the circumstances under people. Canada, one of the things we know about Canada from last census is that there's an unprecedented amount of people living in single family or single households with just one person in the household. So that did affect people, certainly under the pandemic. The work from home affected their ability to connect with other people, and they were already, there's a higher risk of loneliness. So there were definitely downsides to work from home, but maybe not the ones that we expected.
Yes, that makes sense. And do you have any advice for managing the tensions that may develop between staff who've been working through the pandemic, who are burnt out or feeling unappreciated, especially in cases where new staff may have negotiated more flexibility and other benefits given the current competitive hiring landscape? So it's a very different situation from when they entered the workforce.
Okay, so what I'm understanding from this question is that there's new people that came in that have better work circumstances because of the fact that they're coming in with the learnings, the organizational learnings of the pandemic, so that they're actually at a better starting point than the people that worked through that. And that's something, to me, that is something that goes right to the top, where the organization needs to think about, are we being fair to the people that have proven themselves to us? And that just because they started out on a different contract, do we need to equalize those contracts? That's part of it. That the organization as a whole really needs to consider those things and not go, well, aren't we lucky? We still got a bunch of old people that were paying less and giving less vacation time because they agreed to that 10 years ago. And now we've learned we need to do it differently. So we're going to give other people more benefits. So that's not how it works. And that's not a fairness. That's a blight on the organization. And managing the tensions, I think you need to really kind of look at that. That's not between people. That shouldn't be a tension between Joe and Mary, because Mary's the old timer and Joe came in with better benefits. That's not it's not personal. And I think that's one of the things that people need to remember, that it's not between you and me if we're on different contracts. And so that tension, and my belief is in any of these things, don't ignore it. You need to bring it out into the open and acknowledge that that is a cause of tension. And then you need to talk to people about how can we fix this? How can we change this within the organization? What suggestions do you have? And this is definitely one of those areas where the dialogue and open dialogue and just not letting that be the elephant in the room is incredibly important.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much, Renzia, for such a great presentation, for taking the extra time to have the extended Q&A portion with us. Do you happen to have any final comments before we sign off today?
Just that I hope that people have taken some new perspectives that are maybe challenged in some of those things, that they're able to if you're managers, to let go of some of the fears, and that people will be inspired to think about, what is my return on investment? What is my strategic plan? Not just, for today, but in the future. How do I see this organization? How do I see myself as a manager? How do I see my team working? What kind of team do I want? And what are the things that I can do to make that happen? And I hope that people are just inspired to think a little bit about that and kind of think beyond the challenges of here and now.
Thank you so much. And I would just like to remind everyone that you will receive a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to the webinar recording. Please feel free to share this link with your colleagues. The email will also include a survey link, which you can fill out with your feedback on today's webinar. You should see a survey link pop up right here in Zoom following the session as well. And on behalf of Charity Village, thank you so much for joining us today, and I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, Renzia.
Thank you, everyone, for being here.